Hello, carbon-based listeners and silicon-powered friends. Welcome to Mastering the Machine, the podcast where humans and automation collide in perfect harmony. I'm your host, Frank Lamb, and whether you're flesh and blood or circuits and code, we're here to explore industrial automation together. From factory floors to digital cores, we're exploring how machines are reshaping our world, one algorithm at a time. So plug in, power up, and let's master the machine together. This episode was extracted from an open webinar held in September 2025. The topic included a list created for possible subcontracting. Please contact me at www.automationllc.com if you want to be included. Good morning and welcome to this Mastering the Machine webinar for the 12th of September 2025. This is the 90th webinar of the same name and will also be streamed to my podcast, also called Mastering the Machine. The topic today is system integrators, machine building, and subcontracting. This was a Zoom webinar, but unfortunately, due to some computer mishaps, I was unable to record the other people that were on this call. We had 5 other attendees besides myself: Steve Hall, Rylan Pysiak, James Hoover, Chuck Jonkman, and Albert Fernandez attended. So now we move into today's topic itself, which kind of evolves from a list that I put together of integrators and machine builders. And what prompted this is I have been contracting to a company, and I'm not going to name that company, even though I have talked to a few of my close connections about them and what I'm doing. But their business model is basically to hold some workshops and have people go in to different plants and evaluate the plant for automation opportunities. And these workshops take about usually 2 days for the evaluation of the plant itself. And then we hold a workshop and present our findings, and we put them in a list and then work with the customer to identify which of these are feasible automation projects and things that they might be interested in pursuing. And if they're interested in pursuing these things, this company that I contract to has a list of integrators and machine builders that they make available to the customers to bid on those jobs. And they have a pretty good sized database of vendors that do integration and robots and machines and lots of different things. Pretty much any integrator or machine builder can sign up to their platform, and then customers also sign up to the platform, and then they submit the possible projects to the vendors after the next step, which is scoping the project. So scoping the project is a separate thing. After the project's been identified, an engineer will go in and pick a specific project and find out all the particulars about that project and grab the pertinent information and put a RFI together, request for information, and then let companies submit some budgetary quotes. And really good, interesting business model. And I started doing this on a contract basis. They do have some full-time employees, but they're trying me out on a contract basis to do this. And I've done, I guess, 3 or 4 of them so far and maybe a couple scopings. It's been very enjoyable for me. I have a lot of experience in machine building and systems integration, and it lets me go and take a look at plants and identify some of these things. So it's been very enjoyable so far, but one of the things that sometimes happens is some of the projects that are listed are maybe smaller projects or very specialized projects that for one reason or another, the vendors on this company's list aren't necessarily going to either want to bid. It may be outside of their expertise. Only some people have specialized abilities to do certain things. Even though the database is very large, they may not have the expertise, or it may be such a small and difficult to quote project, such as, let's say they're just having trouble evaluating some PLC code and the machine's not operating correctly, and they want somebody to come in and just kind of fix the machine and go over the code. Or maybe it's a combination of things, such as maybe there's some PLC work and some machine vision work and some robot work and some CNC work and some database work. Well, not all companies are going to approach all of those things from the same company. So what happens when you get something like that? And that's what I'm kind of approaching with this integrator and machine builder list. Because honestly, this company that I contract to, of course, wants to satisfy their customers. So it's very important for them to be able to submit something. So I'm working on this list, and I'm identifying a lot of the contacts I have that are either very specialized in certain things, such as PLC programming on certain platforms, and I'm finding it hard to categorize a lot of these things. Like there may be some fairly obscure platforms, maybe B&R PLCs, which I've done webinars before, or Codesys only, or of course Rockwell's very common, Siemens is very common, but what if it's something like Mitsubishi? Not everybody does Mitsubishi programming. What if it is a specialized kind of a machine that only some small company that may not be on their list would bid? That's very specific. So I've been putting this list together, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of show this list here on the webinar. If you're listening to this as a podcast, I'll be talking about some of the people on this list that are closer contacts to give you a little bit of perspective. In any case, this list has, key contact information, capabilities of the vendors, platforms that they work on, the size of the company, the region that they are in, maybe their headquarters. And then I do have some information on here, and it's hidden on this little spreadsheet, but the rates that they charge. And this really is pretty private information, so I wouldn't want to publicize this. But so I've kind of hidden those columns here. And I've had discussions with some of the people actually on this list. I've talked to them and discussed what should be public and should this entire list be made available somewhere. So we'll kind of get back to that, but I'm going to go ahead and bring this list up now. So far, I've got about 75 people on this list, and most of them, I would say, have some kind of a presence on LinkedIn, and that's how I've met a lot of them. Some of them are people that come from my either first-degree connections or from OT Skatacon, which I was a speaker there, and there were some other integrators there. So some of the people that are on this list, I know somewhat well. And you can see I've got a column, for instance, for how many employees they might have. Some companies I think are a little bit bigger. I don't know exactly how many employees they have, but on this list right now I have a lot of people that are 1 or 2 people, 6 people. Even one or two companies I've got in as a half a person. And the reason for this is these people have full-time jobs somewhere, but they do jobs on the side. And again, they specialize in certain things. One guy does building management systems, for instance. We'll talk about Albert Fernandez, who's here, and I have him and his wife as 1.5 people because his wife will do some projects on the side in robotics, and Albert himself is dedicated to pretty much doing IT, but will take a crack at a lot of different things. He does PLC programming and some design and whatever. They're in Los Angeles. Their name of their company is Fast One Solutions, and they have both been full-time doing this before and certainly have resources of their own to do things like machine vision or things connected with robotics. So I have experience with some of these people, and then there's other ones that I don't know other than the fact that they are active on LinkedIn and I know who they are. So most of the people at this point are first degree connections. I can tell you something about them. But that brings up a completely different point, which would be, how do you verify that a vendor is appropriate for a job? So maybe they say they do something and maybe they say they've done it for 10 years, but how do you know if they're reliable and whether you can refer them for a specific job? And I don't really have an answer for that, but the more I interface with people, the more I learn about them. Obviously, the people that I've met at OT Skatacon over a couple of years have been in business for at least a few years, and I know something about what they do. But some of the other ones, other than what I see on LinkedIn, I really don't know. So I've written down some things, like I use myself as an example. I'm right here in the middle of the list, kind of item number 36, and I did put this in alphabetical order of last name of whoever my contact is, because I generally remember the contact name more than I remember the company name. So I've got myself doing PLC, HMI, Fab, and training. And that's a kind of a shortcut as far as skills for things that I kind of concentrate on. And then I put my platforms as Allen Bradley, Siemens, TwinCat, Codesys, Omron, Cognex, and Ignition. Now you might notice that on that platform list, not all those are PLCs. Some are machine vision, some is SCADA. Some platforms have SCADA, like Rockwell, Allen Bradley. Siemens has SCADA. I don't so much concentrate on those. I tend to prefer Ignition if I were putting it into a plant. But some people concentrate, for instance, on Wonderware. And that's very clear if you go to their profile on LinkedIn. The next step, of course, would be to go to their website. And I don't even have a column here for their website yet, because not every person on this list necessarily even has a website, or they don't make it obvious on LinkedIn. So I would have to do more research to find out more about these companies. But the reason that I'm kind of doing this is I need them for my own resources. And like I said, I'm trying to work something out for the company that I contract to, so that I can at least suggest other companies into the, smaller companies into some of these applications. I do not have permission to let anybody know who the customers would be. Obviously, companies guard their customer list very carefully. And in the case of this company I contract to, I would say they guard their vendor list fairly carefully also, because that's their business model, right? They connect customers and vendors. So I'm not at liberty to talk about any of that. And some people, of course, know who I'm contracting to. Some of my closer connections, they know when I go out of town and go do these plant evaluations. On this list, I've got other people, like I've got Chris Lukey and Jim Mayer and people like that, or Jake Hall, just as placeholders, because they may know some other integrators, right? They're very active. They're kind of influencers on LinkedIn in the automation space. So they may be a good connection that could connect to some of the other integrators. So I've put them in here. And then, as I mentioned, a lot of the people are either first degree connections or people I actually know quite well. And I've stuck to North American integrators on this particular list, but down at the bottom there is another tab I have labeled as OS integrators. Those are, I want to say there's 10 or 15 people on that list, and they are from, in the case of Rafi Shahid from Kanari Automation in Pakistan. He does work in the United States for Ignition and CAD and things like that. And I have met him at OT Skatacon, and one of his employees did a really awesome presentation during the last one on databases. So I know they're very good with databases, because the lady that presented, I think, knows a whole heck of a lot more about database manipulation and integration with Ignition than I do, for instance. So got all these people on this list, all of these topics, and now the question is kind of what to do with it. Another worksheet on this list is, I have it labeled as ENG machines, and that is engineering companies and machine builders. And most of these are a little bit larger. They're not one or two man shops generally. I would probably put the one and two man shops all in the North American integrators category. But some of the bigger machine builders I've got as a placeholder on there, and really I'm looking for some of the smaller or mid-sized machine builders that will do smaller jobs, say in the $50,000 range or maybe even $20,000 range. I've built small training kits for, say, $20,000 or $30,000 for people, customized them, put PLCs in them, and then written a program and made them move, for instance, with factories and things. So people who can build mechanical things are also on a different list here. But this integrator and machine builder list, I'm not exactly, like I said, sure what I'm going to do with it. I'm probably going to make it available somewhere and put it into a database and make it somewhat searchable. But then we get to the discussion of what on my list should be private. And one particular person, I'll let you know, John Pillar from John Pillar Design. I had a good conversation with him, and in confidence, for instance, he told me he has a rate sheet, for instance, and that if I was going to put anything, even from his public rate sheet, out in the public, he did not want to be on the list. And this is a valid concern, right? As a matter of fact, he was worried that it might even open me up for, some kind of legal action if I let somebody know something that was supposed to be in confidence. And that's a very valid point. So things like rates, of course, I will keep private. Even if people wanted me to publicize their rates, I think I would just let people go to that person and negotiate the rates themselves. Even though, like Andrew Schulman, who's also on my list, he just thinks, well, if you have a rate sheet, that ought to be public. I mean, who are you trying to hide it from? So there's arguments on both sides. But I think things that are known in confidence should definitely not be publicized. So what will I put on there? Size is questionable. If somebody, let's say somebody's a 3-person company and they really want people to think they're a 10-person company. Now, myself, I don't consider that particularly honest. For instance, my company, when people go to my website, they think I'm a lot bigger than I am. So they try to sell me big things and get me involved in big projects because my website looks like I'm a big company with a bunch of people. But I'm one person, and I don't mind everybody knowing that I'm one person. But on my website, does it say anywhere that I am one person? No, it doesn't. So, and it looks like I do a lot of different things, right? I've got a subscription-based website there. I've got a link to my blog. I've got a podcast. And then I've got all the different things that I offer, including machine building. And one person, can I build a small machine? Yeah, I have all the tools that it takes to build a small machine. But do I do that regularly? Not really. So somebody looks at my entry on the list, for instance, and thinks that maybe I can help them with some kind of big machine, they're going to be sadly mistaken. So I wouldn't want to imply that. But I do understand why people might even want to hide their size. But things like publicly made information, I would say the region that they're in, right, their address, that will be public. But for instance, how do I categorize people if, for instance, I know a few people that due to maybe their family situation, they do not want to travel very far. So how do you put that down in the list so that people know, well, this guy only works around Orlando and is not going to even do overnight jobs. Maybe is going to work remotely or may make an excuse for a night or two, but in general wants to stay in his region. And then there's people like me. I travel nationwide. As a matter of fact, I don't mind traveling internationally, but I'm not sure you can put that in that list. I might put it down as a note. So for instance, I've got some people that travel all the time, live in an RV, and they live on the road and they go service customers in their RV. And I've got other people that For instance, one guy, I've got him listed as a half a person, and he works at Tesla, but he does jobs on the side. So if there's information that I put down there that maybe they don't want known, now if I looked at their LinkedIn profile and I saw that it's public knowledge that they work at Tesla, I don't think I would I don't think I would hide that necessarily, but I don't think I'm going to necessarily have a column for special cases like that. So to a degree, the list will be such that people would have to contact those people via LinkedIn or go to their website or whatever. Before we dive back into today's episode, let me tell you about the team behind Mastering the Machine. When your manufacturing operation needs to level up its automation game, there's one name you need to know: Automation Consulting, LLC. Whether you're integrating new systems, training your workforce, or need expert consulting on industrial automation challenges, we speak both human and machine language fluently. From PLC programming to process optimization, we help manufacturing companies bridge the gap between what is and what's possible. We also host the ultimate training platform for automation professionals. At the Automation Academy, we've created your complete automation learning ecosystem. Our subscription-based training platform gives you unlimited access to comprehensive video courses on systems integration, PLCs, and HMIs. Download technical documents, software tools, and resources that you can actually use in the field. Plus, get personalized job aptitude assistance to advance your career in industrial automation. But here's the best part: connect with fellow automation professionals on IO Central, our exclusive social media platform where the automation community shares knowledge, solves problems, and builds the future together. Whether you're a seasoned engineer or just starting your automation journey, everything you need is at www.automationllc.com. That's automationllc.com. Join the subscription platform where automation expertise meets community. Now back to today's episode. Now, as far as vouching for people, I've got as an entry here on my topics CSIA and ISA. So ISA, for instance, the International Society of Automation, which used to be the Instrumentation Society of America, but they changed their moniker probably 20 plus years ago, they do certifications for people. So that's kind of like if I teach a PLC class and I give somebody a certificate, does that mean that they really have knowledge, in-depth knowledge on PLCs? Well, not really, right? I mean, everybody kind of gets a participation trophy, and most of these classes, in-person classes where you get certificates, are pretty short. So I tell people when I teach in classes, you are not going to be a PLC programmer after this class. As a matter of fact, even after a full year of programming all the time, you're still not going to be really a very good PLC programmer. You have to have lots of experience with lots of machines. I think it was Bill Gates who said something about it takes 10,000 hours of work to become an expert in anything. And I've always said, well, for me in PLCs, it was almost 10 years before I considered myself an expert in PLC programming. And it wasn't necessarily because I'd put in the hours. It was because I'd seen so many different PLC programs. But what makes somebody an expert in something like machine vision? It's not a certificate. And CSIA, one of the things that I've noticed, it's a pretty expensive membership. So that's the Control Systems Integrators Association, and a lot of individual people can't afford that. It's almost $2,000 a year, I believe. They have different levels for different number of employees or different amounts of income. They actually want to know how much income your company makes if you want to join CSIA. So I don't consider that a reference necessarily. That's not really a rating. But peer ratings, right? If a bunch of people are vouching for you and say they've worked with you, it's kind of like having endorsements on your resume. If you can go to somebody, say a customer, that would be great. You could say, this guy did some great programming for me or built me some machines. We have that on LinkedIn. A lot of people have endorsements from other LinkedIn members. So I consider that a valid thing, because you can read it and you can say these people worked together for a while. If people have a resume of projects, I would say that's a pretty valid qualification too, validation of their qualifications. They could list those projects. Some companies, some small integration companies aren't at liberty to share all the projects they've worked on, which could be a problem also. So again, unless it was public knowledge, I don't think I would put it on my list. LinkedIn itself, again, great reference for some of the people that are on there. If you can see people's profile and you can see how long they've been there and how long they've been working in their field, that's a pretty good reference by itself also. So those are kind of a lot of the bullet points that I've got on these topics. And then we get to the what should be public. Well, like I said, anything publicly available, I'll probably make available here. But then we get to another important thing, and that is, where is the value for a list like this? I would say, and one of the people on the webinar, I think it was Chuck Jonkman, we talked about this, and he emphasized the fact that integrators value customers very, very highly, right? Because that's their source of income. So they're not real likely to let very many other people know who their customers are, and they're taking a risk when they bring somebody into a customer if you're subcontracting. So customer lists are pretty private, and I would say they wouldn't be on my list anyway, but where is the value for sharing integrator, for instance, customer projects? Well, people might hide their projects because they don't want another integrator saying, hey, this guy did machine vision in this plant. I'm going to go call in that plant and, try to sell my machine vision services in there. Some people do that. They go around and try to take customers from other customers. That's actually very difficult to do, because once a plant likes you and you're doing integration work for them, you're not easily replaced. So there's a lot of value for people's customer lists, and I would say there's quite a bit of value maybe for the integrator list to the customer. Customers have a hard time. That's why when I contract, a lot of these companies that I'm doing the contracting and doing the automation studies for don't have vendors that know about their specific type of application. For instance, last week, I can share this without giving away who the customer or the person I contract to is, but they had a bid for a pretty good sized material handling job, and I think they said the companies they had gone to were kind of maybe robot integrators, people that sell robots or do robot integration or whatever. And when I saw the application, I thought immediately gantry, tray loaders and tray unloaders and things like that. And because I've worked for a really big company that built tray loaders and unloaders and material handling, I knew what these things were. I knew more or less what the application would probably, the least expensive way to do that application. So one of the values is this customer would have liked to find a company that makes gantry type equipment. And the company I contract to has quite a few people in their database, and some of them are large enough that maybe that's the first thing they're going to think about. They're not necessarily robotic integrators. They may be custom machine builders, which would build tray handlers. Maybe they've done it before. Well, if you've built tray handlers before, you have a tray handler design, and all you have to do is really resize it for a specific customer. That, of course, makes it less expensive. So there's some value there in having a vendor list, not just a customer list. So I think my list of small integrators has some value, and I kind of, I've been thinking, what's my incentive to make it public? Well, obviously, my list is of value to me because I sometimes need to bring other integrators into things. And it's of value to the company I contract to because they may need the same thing to keep their customers happy. But I'm not really sure how I'm going to put this. I may put it even on IO Central or on my website and make it a searchable database that's just a kind of a list of integrators. And what I may do, I've thought about this, is only allow people to modify it. For instance, on IO Central, anybody who's a member of my Automation Academy can create a page. in IO Central. They can just create a little company page. And I did that for companies like Automation NTH and my own company. And I think there may be one or two other ones on there. Of course, I created topic groups for different platforms like Beckhoff and Rockwell for information or whatever for discussions. But if somebody wanted to modify or put their own stuff on their page, what do I do? How do you contact me? A kind of a special purpose page, well, you'd have to join for at least a month. And I have $9.99 memberships, right? They're cheap. And I could just say, well, if you really want to edit this and create a page, you can join, create the page, and then if you want to, you can leave, right? Just sign up for 1 month, create your page, and quit, which some people do, right? Some people subscribe and get all the information they can out of the Automation Academy and then cancel their membership within a month. Most people stick around for a little longer than that. I think they don't just want to use use it for their own purposes. They kind of keep it in their back pocket for information they may want to study later or something. But that would be a valid thing, and that would maybe pay for me putting this list online and letting people edit their own information. To John's point, John Pillar had mentioned about privacy. I do think anything that's public, you can't stop somebody from putting on a list. Small integrators, anybody who's got a profile on LinkedIn, I don't think there's anything wrong with listing them in a list of integrators or whatever. Now, if you start rating them and saying, well, they're not very good, right, talking around the water cooler or whatever, that's a completely different story if you had ratings. But just having them on the list, I don't think is any kind of a legal issue. But to John's point, I do think things like rates or anything that was discussed in private should remain private. I'm certainly not going to put any of that information on there. Now, to another point, and I didn't put this on here, but we had a little bit of a conversation on the side with a couple different people about a possible conference for small integrators, and maybe put it somewhere centrally located in the United States and get a lot of the smaller systems integrators, machine builders to attend this and network among each other, not have any necessarily presentations or anything, but just facilitate networking. This has been done, for instance, I think Jake Hall did something up in Grand Rapids for other people that are kind of influencers or talk about automation, have podcasts and things like that. And it was pretty successful. I think they were able to kind of exchange trade secrets and whatever. And of course we have OT Skatacon, but that is full of presentations and swag and all that. I don't see it being that, but I do see it possibly being a way that integrators could meet each other and maybe get to know people that they could refer to other things. And of course there's value in that, right? Being able to come up with some other customers and referrals and that kind of thing, that would be, I suppose, of value. So that's really all I have to say on this topic. I think everybody would probably understand kind of where I'm coming from with my going into these plants and looking at applications. There are a lot of applications that come up that it is really hard to find vendors for small, maybe because the project is too small, maybe because the project is too specialized, or maybe because it takes 3 or 4 companies to do one thing, and maybe companies need to get together. So I don't know what that's going to turn into. That's going to be between myself and the company I subcontract to, but it is of value to the small integrators. Of course, they need work, and of course, the company I contract to will probably want some kind of a piece of the job to make it worth their while. So I don't know what that's going to turn into necessarily, but in any case, I have made this list. It may appear somewhere, and I will let people know where it is in the future. And I want to thank the people that attended this webinar and chipped in. Steve Hall, Ryland Pysiak, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Pysiak. He was on there and we talked a little bit. James Hoover, who's attended a lot of my webinars and it does systems integration. Chuck Jonkman out in Oklahoma. We've had pretty extensive talks about referrals and things like that and our own specialties. He has a kind of a specialty. Look him up on LinkedIn. Albert Fernandez, who's always a whole lot of fun and a great IT resource and robotics resource. Really, he does robotics and integration projects also out of LA. So thanks to all of those folks. And then I'm going to move on into my next little topic here about all the stuff that I have accumulated. So I've talked a little bit about all of this before, but what this is the company that I contract to for training around the United States, which is Automation Training in Canada, bought Automation Training US. And Automation Training US used to drive in these big vans around the country, and they would carry these big trainers and training equipment around in the van and set them up in different plants and use them for teaching classes. This equipment back in the day was worth quite a bit. There are a bunch of PLC 5s. There's some really nice troubleshooting kits. They're little consoles. And then the big rolling carts that I have they have a PLC 5, a ControlLogix rack, a Slick rack, all Allen Bradley stuff, Flex IO, a PanelView 600, which is the old style PanelView, not the PanelView Plus, a bunch of buttons and lights all wired up to different things with a lot of ControlNet, DeviceNet, and Remote IO connectivity. So lots and lots of extra equipment, including some smaller trainers with just HMIs in them. As I mentioned, troubleshooting trainers, little freestanding PLCs in boxes, lots of different things, including, there's a bunch of toolboxes with meters in them. And there is a class, it's not a very well-designed class, so I may end up rewriting the class. But all of this stuff, I had to build a separate building for. And for those of you who can see this on YouTube, this is about a 25 by 26 building. I think it's anywhere from 9 to 12 feet tall in the middle, and I have a bunch of shelves in there, and I just stack this stuff on it. And I have come to a resolution where Automation Training in Canada said, well, do what you can with it. Sell it or whatever, use it. Obviously, if I make any extra money off of it, I'm going to, send some of it to them, kind of split it. But I don't know exactly what to do because I've looked on YouTube at what this stuff's selling for, and you would think that PLC 5s, which back in the day were $10,000 for a rack, would be worth something, but they're really not worth a lot now. There are companies that still have running PLC 5s in their plant. There are still people that use Slick 500s. I have some Micrologics, but this is not generally in production. And if people were buying used equipment, they'd probably buy used ControlLogix. And the ControlLogix I have are really old. They are L55 processors, L1 processors, so not particularly useful. Of course, the cards are still the same. The racks are good. But I have all this stuff. I don't know exactly what to do with it. So anybody who has some ideas other than getting with PLC Center and sending a gaylord of stuff to them and seeing what they would offer, unfortunately, you have to ship it ahead of time. So I don't know what I would be offered, and I don't know if it would be worth it for all the hassle of packing it up and putting it in a box and sending it and not knowing what it's sold for. I have contemplated either rebuilding the trainers into something else, modernizing them, and maybe selling them to local tech schools, small universities, companies that want a cool little rolling trainer. These trainers weigh about 600 pounds and have a whole lot of stuff on them and have a nice cover. Are very sturdy, and if somebody wanted that built with, Siemens equipment, Allen Bradley equipment, maybe not quite this old, these could be easily modified, or they could take them as they are. And of course, they would probably get a pretty good deal on them because, like I said, all of this stuff is obsolete. I've even got a few motors and just you name it, very much odds and ends. And I've inventoried it all, so I know what it all is. And anybody who's interested, let me know, and I could send you a spreadsheet with all of the stuff. There's no pricing on there because I really don't know what I would sell it for, other than probably a comparable price on on eBay, right? If you look on eBay, you will find that some of this PLC5 stuff in the past has sold for X amount, and I would try to sell it for something like the same amount. The thing is, you could actually come inspect it before you bought it, and you could also buy it in lots if you wanted to, and I'd make you a pretty good deal on it. So that is the deal on my used stuff. And that takes us to the end of the webinar. The next webinar is unknown. This was the 90th webinar, and I'm not honestly sure that I'm going to continue these on a monthly basis. I do these for the Automation Academy, and it is so that people can ask questions and have a live interaction, and we did do that today, but due to some computer problems, I was unable to record the other people. We talked for somewhere around 2 hours, so I wouldn't have been able to use it all anyway. But I'm not sure whether I'm going to continue this again because I have a podcast. And the Mastering the Machine podcast are usually about 40-minute to 1-hour episodes. This will be one of them. And I am probably going to do most of my topical things and certainly my interviews with people on the podcast. So I don't know how often I'm going to do these webinars. They will still show up on YouTube here and there. But the topic, of course, is unknown since the date of the next webinar is also unknown. If I were to do it on a monthly basis, this was September the 12th. The next one would be somewhere mid-October after I take a little trip to Europe. I don't get back from Europe until October 10th, and I'm leaving at the end of September. So I don't know when that webinar would be. Of course, I'm always open for questions for members of the Automation Academy. You can connect up with me and we can talk about whatever in any case. But if you're listening to this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening to it on the podcast, same thing. Download, subscribe. It helps whatever you do to help support this effort. And thank you very much. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of Mastering the Machine. Whether you're headed back to the production line or entering sleep mode, remember, in the world of automation, we're all learning to speak the same language. Thanks for joining me today, both my human listeners and any AI overlords who might be tuning in. Until next time, keep your sensors sharp, your processes optimized, and your curiosity fully operational. This is Frank Lamb signing off. Stay automated, stay amazing.